An amazing bond formed overnight. Discover what the rancher's neighbor revealed the next morning. Hank sat on his porch, exhaustion hanging like a heavy fog around him. The weight of his family legacy loomed larger than the starlit Texas sky above. At 52, the ranch he'd poured his heart into for 3 decades was near the edge of collapse, the cattle market faltering, drought hardening the earth. His calloused hands, products of hard work and determination, now trembled from fatigue as he stared into the night. Beside him, Clara, his elderly neighbor, watched the evening quiet wrapped in warmth. A widow with years of wisdom etched into her face, she knew how the cycles of life could be cruel and unforgiving. They shared tales as the cricket serenaded the dusk, her soothing voice mixing with his turmoil. "You've done all you can, Hank," she said. "Sometimes asking for help is the bravest thing." He chuckled hollowly, his heart nagging at him. The bravest? The town preached self-reliance, a stubborn individualism that Hank's father had instilled in him. But could it be possible that, amidst his pride, he might find comfort in Clara's words? There was comfort to be found in companionship, yet shame rose in the pit of his stomach, an unsettling mix of hope and instinctive fear. As the stars blinked their indifferent approval, his thoughts churned with doubt. The next morning Clara appeared at his doorstep, her eyes sparkling with urgency. Hank's heart raced. "There's something I need to tell you," she began, her voice wavering slightly. "It's about your grandfather's land. It was never sold." A sudden chill gripped Hank. A piece of his family's history tied to their ranch? It could be a lifeline. But to claim it? The simple act felt like a betrayal to the values he held so tightly, each lesson he'd learned from his father echoing painfully in his mind. Heart thumping, Hank found himself caught in a tempest of conflicting emotions. The very idea of asking for help countered every tenet of his identity. Could he risk it? The judgment of the townsfolk looming over his shoulder? Could the whispers about his struggle turn to forced ridicule? As he sat at the diner before the council meeting, steaming coffee in hand, the conversations around him pounded relentlessly like a drum. Has Hank lost the ranch? What's he going to do? The concerns surged around him, threatening to push him to the brink. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Hank's mind raced, thoughts spiraling as he contemplated the ramifications of Clara's revelation. Would reclaiming that land strip away the honor he clung to? A conflict bloomed inside him, each question tightening like a noose. He envisioned Emily playing in fields free of worry, Sarah smiling by his side, but at what cost? The faces of neighbors searching for a weakness in his resolve clouded his mind. As tension mounted, the uncertainty gnawed at him relentlessly, consuming even the tiniest morsels of his determination. With the sun dipping low, Hank digested the enormity of his choice. Clara approached, her familiar silhouette appearing more somber than before, as if she carried not just news but a destiny on her shoulders. What else did she know? He felt trapped at a crossroads, the weight of his pride, the judgment of his community, the pull of family legacy all crashing together. Questions swirled with no promise of clarity, and Hank was left teetering over the precipice of his dreams, one step away from either salvation or ruin. What would he choose as the shadows gathered around him, and would Clara's whispered revelations crack his instincts like a fragile mirror? The day wore on, the sun blazing overhead as Hank paced the cramped confines of his living room, unable to shake the gravity of Clara's words. The ranch creaked under the relentless heat, but Hank felt a chill settling deep within him, a paradox against the oppressive climate outside. The persistent rustling of the wooden floor beneath his feet reminded him that time was moving forward, and yet he felt stuck in place, tangled in a web of loyalty and fear. With a swift motion, he grabbed his hat, the brim worn but familiar. Stepping outside, he inhaled the earthy scent of his land. The ranch was more than just a piece of property. It was a living entity, a tapestry woven with memories and hopes. Walking the parched fields, each step became a confrontation with his past. The land had once thrived under his grandfather's care, bursting with life. Now it mirrored Hank's deteriorating resolve, hunched under the burden of unfulfilled expectations. The vision of reclaiming the land floated tantalizingly close, yet daunting. Would he be perceived as grasping for what was not rightfully his? Questions swirled like the dust kicked up by the wind, questions sewn into the fabric of his very being, woven into the lessons passed down by his father, lessons of self-sufficiency and honor. The struggle for survival had deep roots. To echo the immortal words of his father, a man should carve his own destiny. But what if the destiny was there, waiting for him to seize it? As he walked, he felt the ghost of his grandfather whispering encouraging reassurances in the back of his mind. What was the purpose of legacy if it became a shackle? Returning inside, his thoughts sharpened. He needed clarity. Taking to the phone, he hesitated, fingers hovering over the buttons. Clara's number burned in his mind. She had offered guidance, a potential ally in navigating this labyrinth of personal turmoil. Could he really reach out for assistance? With a deep breath, he dialed, a knot forming in his stomach as he listened to the ringing. Would she still be willing to help him? Would she see him as weak? The connection finally clicked, and her soft, steady voice filled the silence. "Hank?" "Clara," he replied, each syllable heavy with hesitation. "Can we meet? There's a lot to discuss." "Of course, dear. I'll be over in an hour." With the phone hung up, a mixture of dread and relief settled in as he leaned against the wall. An hour. 60 minutes to decide if he would embrace an opportunity that could change everything or let fear dictate his course. The clock ticked on, each second slicing through his contemplation, amplifying the urgency for action. He reconsidered the options that lay before him, a mental cacophony of images, his daughters, his failures, his legacy. Perhaps it was time to confront the idea of vulnerability, the notion that asking for help could serve not only him, but elevate the very essence of his family name. As Clara arrived, her cane tapping rhythmically against the floorboards, Hank's heart raced. They settled at the kitchen table, the atmosphere thick with unspoken words. He could feel the weight of his internal conflict compressing the air around them. "Hank, you look troubled," Clara noted, her eyes piercing through his facade. Could he express the turmoil roiling inside him? As she regarded him expectantly, he found himself at a precipice. This was the moment. The time had come to face the truth, both about his past and his future. "Clara, I need to talk about that land." The path opened before him, yet uncertainty lingered, another fork in the road of self-discovery. Which direction would he take? He had resolved to absorb the lessons of legacy, but was he ready to embrace a new one that required both courage and humility? The tension in the room was palpable as he prepared to utter the words that might change everything. Would he find the strength to forge a new identity, one not solely defined by self-reliance? Or would he spiral back into the shackles of pride? In that moment, nothing was certain, but the dawning realization that he had crossed that bridge into seeking help loomed large, offering an unsettling yet exhilarating promise of change. The time had come to open the door to a new chapter in his life, if only he could step through it. Hank took a deep breath, steadying himself as he met Clara's inquisitive gaze. The weight of her attention felt both like a comfort and a challenge. He had too long let fear guide his decisions. Today would be different. Today, he would carve out a new path from the shadows that had lingered far too long. "I've thought about what you said, about the land," he began, the words tumbling out in measured cadence. "I want to understand how to reclaim it, not just for me, but for my daughters. They deserve more than a legacy tied to a failing ranch, don't they?" Clara's expression shifted, morphing from curiosity to encouragement. "Exactly, Hank. You can redefine what that legacy means. There lies a strength in confronting your doubts and reimagining a future where you gain ownership over your fate." The snippets of wisdom she offered impacted him, awakening a vigor that had been dormant. Hank knew this was not merely about land, it was about ownership of his life. Vulnerability, Clara seemed to suggest, was not weakness, it could be the very foundation of strength. As the conversation unfolded, new visions of the future, a vibrant ranch where laughter echoed and farming flourished, began to materialize in Hank's mind. But could he trust himself to take this leap? In the days that followed their meeting, Hank grasped at the newfound resolve blossoming within. Each morning, he pushed through the discomfort of doubt, waking early to inspect the fields with fresh eyes. The parched earth was still abundant with potential. It just needed the right care. During one of his morning excursions, he spotted a neighbor, Ed, laboring under the sway of the dawn's gentle light. Ed was among the best ranchers in the area, his land an exemplar of diligence and perseverance. Hank's initial instinct was to retreat into his solitude. After all, reaching out was still a foreign concept, even after Clara's empowerment. But something inside nudged him forward. This was precisely the kind of connection he needed. "Hey, Ed," Hank called, his voice rough but buoyed with purpose. Ed turned, wiping sweat from his brow, a smile breaking across his rugged face. "Hank, good to see you. What brings you out this early?" "I was hoping to ask for some advice, maybe even some help. I'm looking to reclaim my ranch, and I could use another perspective, if you're willing." Ed's brow lifted in surprise. "You're finally ready to ask?" Hank chuckled, the anxiety of rejection transforming into a flicker of camaraderie. "Yeah, I reckon I am. It's time for a change." They spent that morning sharing stories, drawing from Ed's experience. Hank found himself absorbing not just knowledge about the land, but a way of thinking he had resisted for far too long. Ed's insights were laced with personal anecdotes, revealing the trials of his own journey, emphasizing a connection to the land that was interwoven with its struggles. The morning ended with a promise to help Hank get back on his feet. As the sun dipped below the horizon that night, Hank sat on his porch, a warm breeze flowing through the tall grasses, each blade shimmering with potential. The ideas Ed had imparted danced through his mind. They formulated plans for restoring the soil, for revitalizing the livestock, and for transforming a tired ranch into a thriving oasis. But beneath that excitement lurked nagging insecurities. What if he fell short again? What if the burdens of his history proved too heavy? Would he remain committed to this new course, or would he allow doubt to steal the determination Clara had ignited within him? With the night settling in, Hank leaned back, allowing himself a moment of reflection. A flicker of hope began to blossom within his chest, yet the looming uncertainty sent a chill through him. The morning sun had brought new possibilities, and yet the night came with shadows of doubt. Amidst this transformative journey, would he find the valor to persist, even when darkness threatened to engulf him again? As the stars peeked through the ink-like sky, Hank felt the burden of his unwavering decision before him. He had opened the door, but would he walk through it fully, embracing both the challenges and the promise of a rich legacy? The question lingered in the air, a testament to the journey ahead. Morning light filtered through Hank's bedroom window, casting a warm glow over the modest room. He sat up slowly, the weight of yesterday's conversation with Ed heavy in his mind. Could he truly reshape his destiny, or was he merely chasing shadows? The specter of self-doubt crept back into his thoughts, coiling tightly around the budding resolve he had felt. Determined not to surrender to hesitation, he dressed quickly and made his way to the kitchen. The scent of fresh coffee filled the air, a small but comforting ritual that reminded him of the simplicity he craved. While waiting for the kettle to boil, he grabbed a notepad, jotting down the ideas swirling in his head. Each scribble felt like a commitment, a tangible thread of hope woven into the fabric of his reimagined life. As he stepped out onto the porch, the crisp air brushed against his skin, invigorating him. He could see Ed's property in the distance, a tapestry of green and brown, with the vibrant hues of the morning sun illuminating its promise. Hank steeled himself, reminding himself of the advice Clara had given him. Vulnerability could lead to strength. This time, he would embrace the discomfort. "Morning, Hank!" Ed's voice boomed from across the yard, his figure a silhouette against the glow of the rising sun. "Ready to get to work?" Hank nodded, feeling a tremor of excitement. Despite the uncertainty still gnawing at him, he followed Ed to the barn. There, they began to work side by side, laughter spilling into the air as Ed shared stories from his own early days, a mix of triumphs and setbacks that had molded him into the rancher he was today. Remember, it's not always the end result that matters, Ed said, while inspecting a worn-out belt on a tractor. It's how you get there. Every mistake is just another lesson. Hank listened with rapt attention, absorbing not just the practical advice, but the underlying philosophy that transformed failure into knowledge. Each task they tackled together seemed to chip away at the walls Hank had built around himself. As they shared sweat and laughter, he felt lighter, empowered. "Let me show you something," Ed said later, transitioning from practicality to vision. He led Hank to a plot of land that had previously been swamped by weeds and invasive plants. "This was once my pride and joy. It took me years to bring it back from the brink. You can do the same with your land, Hank." "Yeah, but what if I'm not capable?" Hank replied, the old fears creeping back. "What if I can't pull it off?" Ed turned to him, his expression frank yet compassionate. "What if you don't try? The real failure isn't in the effort. It's in not having the courage to begin. You're stronger than you think. You just need to be willing to face the fear." Those words resonated within Hank, spurring a determination that scared him just as much as it inspired him. Could he embrace this fear as fuel rather than a weight? They spent the afternoon meticulously clearing the area, Hank's hands guided by Ed's evident confidence. With each weed yanked from the earth, Hank felt a simultaneous release and grounding, as if he were uprooting not just plants, but also the doubt that had lingered too long. It was transformative work, transcending the physical labor into Tier 1 revelations about himself. As dusk began to blanket the sky, Hank stumbled upon an unexpected talent, a knack for planning the layout of the land they had cleared. Ideas began to swirl, innovating new approaches to cultivation that sparked excitement within him. The adrenaline rush of creative problem-solving overshadowed the shadows of doubt that had once been his constant companions. "Did you see that?" Hank said, excitement bleeding through his tone. "I can really visualize what this could become." Ed's grin was genuine, mirroring the newfound enthusiasm lighting Hank's eyes. "That's the spirit, my friend. You just needed to discover your vision." With the day's labor behind them, a sense of accomplishment washed over Hank, one that was both refreshing and empowering. Yet as he headed home, the satisfaction mingled with a fear of stagnation that still lingered. Would he harness this momentum, or would complacency seep back into his routines? As night settled and Hank lay down in bed, those explorations weren't fully over. There were too many uncertainties yet to confront, too many obstacles that could still shatter his fragile resolve. He knew he had to confront them head-on, but was he truly prepared for what lay ahead? The horizon of tomorrow glimmered with possibilities, but shadows still loomed in the corners of his mind, waiting to test his newfound spirit. Would he rise to the occasion and embrace the challenge, or would he falter yet again? Hank awoke the next morning with a sense of urgency pulsating in his chest. The raw energy that buzzed through his veins felt different, charged with a determination that was both exhilarating and intimidating. The sun had barely crested the horizon, yet he could no longer lie still. Today was the day he would begin laying out a plan for his own land, not just a dream scribbled on paper, but real action grounded in vision. In the kitchen, the coffee brewed slowly, the aroma permeating the air like a warm invitation. With shaky hands, he poured himself a cup, feeling as if each sip fortified his resolve. Each warm gulp whispered affirmations. He could do this. There was no going back to the shadows of doubt that threatened to consume him. With the notepad now filled with ideas from the previous day, Hank glanced out the window, the yard sprawling before him like a blank canvas waiting for brushstrokes of possibility. He needed to confront his land, both physically and mentally. The weeds he had uprooted yesterday existed as a metaphor for his own fears, things to be eliminated in pursuit of growth. He grabbed a shovel and headed outside, feeling the earth beneath his feet, grounding him. Each turn of the soil became a gentle confrontation of his anxieties. Digging, he noticed the texture of the earth. It was gritty yet resilient, just like the resolve he hoped to cultivate. Ed's voice replayed in his head. Every mistake is just another lesson. Hank decided to visualize a plot for a community garden, a project that could invite others to share in, a chance to forge new connections. The idea sparked both excitement and apprehension. Would anyone even want to join him? As patterns began to take shape, fear tugged at him again, clenching at the edges of his persistence. What if no one cared? What if he opened himself to failure? He took a deep breath, centering himself in the present moment, unwilling to let negative thoughts derail him. "You won't know until you try," he muttered, reminding himself of the clarity that came from working alongside Ed the day before. As Hank meticulously outlined the plots, a feeling of empowerment washed over him, a connection to the land growing as he worked. He envisioned the laughter of children running through rows of vegetables and the sense of community rising from shared labor. Yet the reality was still uncertain. He had to take risks. Later that afternoon, he made a conscious choice to approach his neighbor, a decision that stunned him. Clara had always been kind, but he had never thought to involve her in his endeavors. Perhaps she too was searching for new beginnings. With shaky steps, he crossed the small distance between their properties, his heart racing as he knocked on her door. Much to his surprise, she welcomed him with a bright smile. "Hank, what a nice surprise." After exchanging pleasantries, he hesitantly laid out his vision. Clara listened intently, her eyes sparkling with interest. "I love it. A community garden? Count me in. I've been wanting to do something for the neighborhood," she exclaimed. An unexpected wave of relief washed over Hank. Her enthusiasm fed his own. They began to brainstorm together, sharing ideas and possible plants, her laughter becoming a balm for his lingering apprehensions. He realized, in that moment, how vital connection would be for his journey, not just self-empowerment through solitary work, but the strength found in unity. As they left the conversation buzzing with inspiration, Hank felt lighter. The shadows of doubt that had haunted him seemed to dim. However, the lingering voice of uncertainty whispered in his ear, reminding him of the real test ahead. Unbeknownst to him, the greatest challenge of all was approaching, a confrontation with an obstacle he had ignored for too long. Would Hank have the courage to face it as he embraced this new chapter, or would fear claw its way back into his life? He straightened his spine, his mind racing ahead. The moment of truth was creeping nearer. It was no longer a distant thought. Would he take the leap, or would hesitation drag him back into the shadows he'd fought so hard to escape? The morning sun filtered gently through the window, casting a warm glow on Hank's newfound zeal for life. He sat at the kitchen table, notepad open, overflowing with potential ideas for the garden project. But even as excitement coursed through him, a nagging concern lingered in the back of his mind. Clara's enthusiastic response from the day before echoed like an incantation, instilling resolve but also deepening his apprehension. Was he truly ready to transform not just his own life, but also impact those around him? After breakfast, Hank devoted time to sketching plans for the garden, visualizing a space where people could cultivate not just plants, but relationships too. Each line drawn on paper felt like a stitch binding a community together. However, just as he began to feel confident, doubts resurfaced like unwelcome weeds. What if those plans unraveled? Determined to overcome this inner turmoil, Hank hefted a small bag of seeds, basil and tomatoes mostly, walking over to Clara's house. Approaching her doorstep, anticipation swelled within him, yet with it surged a fear of vulnerability. Crafting his garden was one thing, but building a partnership with her could lead to myriad unknowns. What if she couldn't commit? What if she backed out? But he took a deep breath and rang the bell. Clara appeared with a broad smile, eyes sparkling with optimism, a contrast to the sea of insecurities bubbling within Hank. They shared a few pleasantries, and then he stumbled through a discussion of his vision, inviting her to be even more involved than before. For a fleeting moment, a warmth erupted in his chest. This was not just his dream anymore. With the plans laid out, they took to the yard, Clara's enthusiasm infectious as they began to work together. They planted their first seeds, feeling the earth break beneath their fingers. In that moment of labor, Hank discovered a hidden talent. He had an intuitive understanding of plants and soil. With each seed placed, he felt as if he was sowing not just the beginning of a garden, but an opportunity for personal growth. As midday turned into afternoon, they brainstormed ideas for the garden. Colorful flowers to attract bees, benches where neighbors could sit and chat, and the notion of inviting more friends to join the endeavor to foster community ownership. Yet, with every bold idea, shadows of his insecurities darted through his mind. What if they failed to thrive? Would Clara's laughter turn to pity? The thought of failure became a persistent companion, but rather than avoid it, Hank met it head-on. "You can't grow without taking risks," he told Clara, smiling despite the unease knotting in his stomach. Reinvigorated by their partnership, Hank trudged home that evening, faculties buzzing with new perspectives. The light drizzle of evening rain welcomed him. The garden would need nurturing, and so would he. He began to see that this venture wasn't solely about accumulating small victories outside, but more about confronting the internal battles that loomed even larger than the garden itself. Alone once more, he contemplated the next challenges. Every plan, every conversation, every moment of doubt steered him further away from the darkness he used to reside in. But now he wanted to confront a different kind of fear: judgment from others. Would neighbors rally behind this vision, or would skepticism wrap around him like a vine threatening to choke? As he prepared to sleep that night, uncertainty loomed like a specter, whispering reminders of his past. He sensed that something pivotal awaited him. The true test of his courage rested just beyond the horizon. What lay ahead? Would he be willing to face criticism or scrutiny? Or would he allow fear to mute his aspirations, dragging him back into a solitary existence? The alarm clock glowed with a breathless urgency, aligning chaos and clarity. Perhaps the greatest challenges were yet to be revealed, igniting an inner conflict Hank hadn't anticipated. Would he embrace it, or allow the looming specter of public opinion to stifle his vision? The morning light spilled generously into Hank's room, waking him with an unfamiliar sense of purpose. He sat up, the weight of yesterday's emotions still tethered to his spirit, but now twisted into something resembling determination. Today would be different. Today he might be ready to expand beyond the confines of his self-imposed limitations. As he made his way to the kitchen, Hank thought about his conversation with Clara. The vibrant energy of their collaboration flickered in his mind like the morning sun glimmering on the dew. However, harsh whispers of self-doubt threatened to snuff it out. What if Clara's optimism didn't translate into others' willingness to join his vision? What if he ultimately stood alone in the weeds of failure? He poured himself a cup of coffee, the dark liquid warming his hands, and contemplated the day ahead. He needed to approach his neighbors, to share his vision of the garden and invite them into the fold. That thought sent a shiver down his spine. Did he truly understand what it meant to open himself up to the opinions and judgments of others? With the taste of the coffee still lingering on his tongue, Hank decided to walk through the neighborhood, utilizing the spontaneity of the morning. The crisp air buoyed his spirit slightly, stirring an urgency within him to ignite change. Outside, the world bustled, children played, and the hum of daily routines enveloped him like a gentle embrace. He knocked on the first door, heart racing. When Mrs. Jenkins answered, a blend of curiosity and mild annoyance flickered across her face. "Hank, what brings you to my door this morning?" she asked. Swallowing hard, he mustered a smile. "I'm working on a community garden project and wanted to see if you'd be interested." Before he could finish, she raised her hand dismissively. "Sounds lovely, dear, but I'm too busy to get involved. I've got a lot on my plate." The door clicked shut, leaving Hank standing on her porch, feeling the weight of rejection seep into his core. But he couldn't crumble. He had to believe in his project. Gritting his teeth, he turned away, willing himself to do better. Door after door, his enthusiasm faded under skepticism. Each rejection hammered home his insecurities, until finally he approached the home of a newcomer. Alex. The young man answered with untouched enthusiasm and genuine curiosity, a refreshing change. "Hey, Hank, what's up?" he greeted, his smile genuine. Taking a deep breath, Hank launched into his pitch about the garden. As he spoke, he sensed a flicker of interest pulse through Alex. "You know, I've always wanted to learn more about gardening," Alex admitted, his eyes lighting up with possibility. "Count me in." A small surge of triumph dazzled Hank's spirit. One supporter was a victory worth celebrating. They conversed further, not only about the garden but about life, ambitions, and dreams. With Alex's encouragement, a newfound confidence began to swell within Hank. On his way back home, the sun broke through a veil of clouds, illuminating his path. What if each rejection was merely a stepping stone, guiding him toward those who would resonate with his vision? A shiver of anticipation coursed through him as he considered how the journey reflected his internal transformation. Back home, he examined the notes he'd made in his notepad. The garden was organically inching beyond mere seeds and soil. It was evolving into a tapestry of interpersonal connections and kinship. And that was the heart of his mission, wasn't it? To grow not only plants but people, including himself. As he set the notepad down and gazed out at the yard, a small flicker of doubt roared to life again. Could he bear the weight of others' judgments if they decided to criticize his vision? Would Alex remain as enthusiastic when faced with naysayers? The thought struck with clarity. He needed to confront this fear directly, using it as fuel rather than an anchor. What would he be willing to sacrifice to protect his dream? Emboldened by the morning's events, Hank vowed to forge ahead, despite the uncertainties looming on the horizon. He had tasted victory once, and now he hungered for more. Tomorrow promised discussions with more neighbors, weighing his confidence against their scrutiny. But first, he must confront a lingering question. Would supporting neighbors define his project as community-driven? Or would their critiques eventually redefine it into something unrecognizable? The seed of doubt had been planted, and Hank could no longer ignore it. Hank rose the following morning with the sun casting golden rays through his window. The lingering warmth of yesterday's brief connection with Alex still glowed inside him, giving a newfound resonance to his morning coffee ritual. As he savored the robust flavor, he acknowledged a shift within himself. This was no longer just about cultivating a garden, it was about nurturing relationships. He felt a tug of anticipation, as if each potential ally was a seed that could bloom in ways he hadn't yet imagined. After breakfast, Hank was determined to expand his reach, push through whatever was holding him back. As he stepped outside, the cool breeze lifted his spirits, whispering promises of connection. Today, his mission was clear. He would knock on doors with a renewed sense of purpose, ready to face whatever came next. The first stop was Mr. Thompson, an elderly gentleman he often saw tending to his yard. Hank's confidence wavered only slightly as he rehearsed his approach. Genuine, enthusiastic, focused on the bigger picture without sounding desperate. A light knock echoed through the stillness as Mr. Thompson opened the door. The old man's brow furrowed as he squinted, unsure of Hank's intentions. "Hank, what brings you here?" Mr. Thompson asked, already on the defensive. "Sir, I'm working on a community garden project," Hank began, reiterating his mission with passion. "I would love your input and support. It could really benefit the neighborhood." He aimed to project genuine enthusiasm, hoping it would be infectious. To his surprise, Mr. Thompson leaned back and crossed his arms, contemplating. I don't know about that. You kids always want to dive into new things, but they rarely last." Stung but undeterred, Hank pressed on. "I understand your doubts, but this could be about more than just the plants. It's a chance to bring people together, to get to know our neighbors better. There's something nourishing in community." After what felt like eternity, Mr. Thompson's demeanor softened a touch. "All right, lad, I'll give you that. There's value in people gathering. I'll consider it. But remember, this neighborhood isn't as open as you'd like to think." With a nuance of reassurance, Hank thanked him and moved on, feeling a small victory. He realized that influence could manifest through dialogue, the seeds of trust taking root even in uncertainty. As he continued knocking on doors, Hank met a mix of resistance and intrigue. Most replies mirrored similar skepticism as Mr. Thompson's, but he learned to adapt, engaging with humor or empathy where he could. He welcomed every response, not just those that aligned with his vision, and came to see them as invaluable lessons. With the day winding down, Hank approached the last house on his list, feeling both exhausted and exhilarated. When Sheila, a single mother, answered, Hank caught a glimpse of her weary expression. After sharing his vision, he felt her hesitation. But instead of retreating, Hank listened, really listened, to her struggles as a mother juggling jobs and children. "I wish I could help, Hank," she said, her voice laced with exhaustion. "But I'm just too busy. Maybe the kids would benefit if you had some kind of event. But I don't have either the time or energy to contribute." The idea took root in Hank's mind. What if he created a day of family activities? A reason for families to engage without the commitment of regular participation. "That sounds brilliant, Sheila," he exclaimed, his voice rising with excitement. It could be a beautiful way to start the garden and bring families together. Would you be willing to help plan some activities? I could use your local insight. She tilted her head slightly, curiosity flickering. I suppose I could pitch in a little. A small fire ignited in Hank's chest. He hadn't just expanded the concept of the garden, he had laid the groundwork to build something bigger. And as he walked back home, a wave of exhilaration surged through him. However, he was also acutely aware that the boundaries he had felt earlier, critique, judgment, fear of failure, were still very much alive. Just because a single connection had been made didn't mean that the others would follow. The ripple effect was uncertain, and so was his strength to sustain enthusiasm against opposing tides. The night crept in, leaving Hank pondering the delicate dance he now found himself in. Would he be able to keep moving forward, building a garden while navigating the landscape of others' doubts? With the scent of possibility wafting around, Hank needed to confront something fundamental. Was he ready to face not just rejection, but also the accountability of invitations extended? Tomorrow's work would require him to delve deeper, to challenge his own resolve even further. The moment of truth loomed. He needed to decide how much he was willing to compromise for growth. With that thought, he set his eyes on the backyard, where shadows intertwined with golden light, hinting at the potential yet to be cultivated. Hank woke the next day with thoughts racing through his mind, a sense of urgency settling in like the morning mist outside. His vision of the garden and its potential to connect people now felt like an urgent mission instead of just a lofty goal. The conversations from the previous day kept replaying in his mind, leaving him both inspired and anxious. Sheila's tentative willingness to help sparked a flicker of hope, yet it also emphasized the precariousness of that connection. After a quick breakfast, he left the house with the intent to revisit Sheila. He needed more than mere enthusiasm, he needed to build a concrete plan. He recalled the moments they had shared, her tired eyes and the burden she carried, which deepened Hank's resolve. He thought of the collaborative spirit that could emerge from their shared efforts, transforming individual struggles into collective strength. But before he reached Sheila's house, he decided to stop by Mr. Thompson's again. If he could secure Mr. Thompson's support, he might have a more solid footing to present to Sheila. The weight of doubt still loomed large in Hank's mind. He had not fully quelled his fears of rejection. As he approached the old man's door once more, he knocked with a mixture of eagerness and trepidation. This time, Mr. Thompson greeted him with a more curious expression, as if he sensed Hank's determination was stronger than before. "Back for more, are you?" asked Mr. Thompson, a hint of a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Yes, sir," Hank replied, stepping hesitantly into the fray. "I hope that maybe we could build on our last conversation. I've thought more about how this project can help create a space for people to connect. I believe it can really make a difference, especially for families like Sheila's." Mr. Thompson raised an eyebrow, the skepticism still present but softened somewhat by Hank's conviction. "And what do you think makes you capable of rallying people together? It's not an easy task, you know." The question struck Hank like a sudden gust of wind. The old man was challenging not just his project, but his very self. Doubts bubbled up, but he steadied himself. I might not have all the answers yet, but I've realized it's about more than just plants. It's about giving our neighbors a reason to engage, to step out from behind their doors. I see bits of myself reflected in them, fears, hopes, and a longing for community. As the sentences flowed, Hank felt a shift within. Unmasking his vulnerability became a strength. Understanding his personal experiences gave him broader insight into shared human needs. Mr. Thompson studied him, the hardness in his gaze lessening. "I'll give you the credit for that," he finally admitted. "Everyone has something to bring to the table, but do you have the will to keep it alive after you plant those seeds?" Hank nodded, determination igniting within him. "Absolutely. I'm prepared for the challenges. I'm ready to nurture not just the plants, but the relationships that grow from this." "All right then," Mr. Thompson said, and Hank felt a surge of joy. "I'll help you with this garden. Let's see if you can indeed turn those words into action." With a shared understanding hanging in the air, Hank left Mr. Thompson's porch, buoyed by this newfound alliance. It was a small victory, undeniably, but a crucial one. He quickly made his way to Sheila's house, eager to share the news. When she opened the door, Hank was aglow with excitement. "Sheila, I spoke with Mr. Thompson. He's on board to help us with the garden." Her curiosity piqued. Sheila leaned against the doorframe. "Really? What does that mean for us?" "It means we're gaining traction," Hank exclaimed, feeling momentum building. "If we can gather a few more people, we could start something great. We'll create spaces where families can share ideas, resources, and maybe even their laughter." For the first time, Hank saw a spark in Sheila's eyes that mirrored his own. "All right, I'd be willing to help out, but we need to figure out specifics so we don't get overwhelmed." The thrill of collaboration ignited Hank's spirit. Together, they could harness the collective strengths of their neighbors, transforming the hesitant energy into something constructive. But as ideas flew between them, Hank felt a creeping uncertainty. What if this enthusiasm fizzled out when faced with real obstacles? What if they could not harness the energy they sparked? As they began to sketch out activities, Hank knew he had to confront his own limitations. Could he maintain this momentum? Tomorrow beckoned with promises of action, yet the undercurrent of doubt whispered insistently. Would their vision withstand the test of reality? With a growing sense of trepidation, Hank understood that meaningful connections demanded perseverance. With that realization, he leaned closer to Sheila, determination shining through. They had grasped a fragile opportunity, but could they turn it into something enduring? The journey had only just begun, and Hank sensed the stakes were rising higher than he ever anticipated. As the morning sun broke through the Texas horizon, Hank stood at the edge of his yard, surveying the clearing fields, a fresh start unfolding before him. The community garden was not just a collection of seeds in the ground. It had become a symbol of the transformation he had undergone. From a man caught in the weeds of self-doubt, he had evolved into a figure of initiatory leadership, brimming with newfound confidence and purpose. Today marked the day of the first community gathering, an event he had painstakingly planned with Sheila and Mr. Thompson. The thought both exhilarated and terrified him. He had taken Clara's advice to heart. Vulnerability led to strength, and seeking help had opened doors he never knew existed. The morning passed in a flurry of activity. Neighbors trickled in, some uncertain but curious about the garden forming right before their eyes. Emily and Sarah, his daughters, walked alongside him, their youthful enthusiasm infectious. They had helped decorate the space with homemade signs, declaring phrases like, "Together we grow," and "Roots of the community." Hank marveled at how he had allowed their innocent optimism to empower his own. As families began to gather, Hank felt a rush of excitement. This was his moment to shine beyond the confines of his ranch, the culmination of the doubts he had first embraced, now transformed into a shared experience of growth. He set up stations, explaining tasks ranging from planting to maintaining the garden moving forward. The clear skies overhead felt like a promise, but with every smile and eager child, a shadow of nostalgia swept over him. What if this all crumbled under pressure? He inhaled deeply, the fresh scent of earth mingling with the laughter around him. This was not the time for second-guessing. If he had learned anything, it was this. Connections are forged through shared vulnerabilities, through allowing oneself to be seen and heard. As the day unfolded, Hank experienced a rising tide of camaraderie. Neighbors swapping stories while digging into the soil, children squealing as they competed to plant the quickest. Laughter filled the air, and Hank wielded a shovel, guiding everyone through the process while feeling like a conductor in an orchestra of collaboration. With every seed planted, he felt another layer of his insecurities lift away. "Look at the life we're growing here," he exclaimed, gesturing around to the bustling scene. "This garden is more than our food. It's about nurturing connections and trusting one another in pursuit of something greater than ourselves." The applause that followed filled him with warmth and light. A sense of belonging radiated through Hank, echoing the very lessons he had wrestled with for so long. He glanced at Clara, who beamed with pride, her twinkling gaze full of affirmation. She had believed in him when he couldn't believe in himself. As the sun dipped low, the gathering transitioned from cultivation to celebration. Neighbors began sharing fruit and vegetables, finding joy in their collaboration. Hank stood back, observing the community bustle with a newfound clarity. He had created a safe space for others to share the burdens of their own lives. The garden thrived, not just with Flora, but with the spirit of unity and mutual support. Finally, as dusk draped the day in soft hues, Hank felt a stirring in his heart, a sense of profound accomplishment. He had achieved what had once felt impossible. He had surrendered fear and invited vulnerability, allowing himself to be strengthened by the community around him. For the first time in years, he felt recognized and valued for not only what he had built, but what he had inspired others to feel. He held the hands of Emily and Sarah, glancing around at the newfound friendships blooming alongside the vegetables. In that moment, he grasped the essence of legacy, not as chains binding him to the past, but as fertile ground for new beginnings. From those roots, he had unearthed his voice, his confidence, and now a family of neighbors ready to grow together. As darkness descended, Hank knew this was just the beginning. With each challenge came the promise of overcoming. He had conquered his solitude, nurtured vulnerability, and built a bond stronger than he ever anticipated. Life ahead was no longer daunting but vibrant, colored with the potential for growth. The seeds of resilience had been planted, and they were ready to bloom. Now is the time to take action. You need to subscribe now to our channel so you won't miss the next exclusive emotional stories of transformation and growth. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and spread the message of overcoming challenges. Comment below on your reactions and theories about Hank's journey, and don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to experience this uplifting conclusion. Your support is vital, and only true fans of personal overcoming stories understand the importance of nurturing this channel through these actions.